You see this giant box? It has over a year's worth of stuff that I completely forgot I ordered. Somehow, it was cheaper to send a bunch of merch to someone where the cost is literal peanuts and then ship it back to me all at once. Think of it like a proxy service for two countries that are next to each other. That being said, I wanted to share my surprise. I love collecting video game figures, and in recent years there have been some gems. Here is my boy, Ai from Super Monkey Ball. The thing that I particularly love about Monkey Man here is that he comes with the tiniest banana as an accessory, but he also comes with just an actual monkey ball, which just always seemed like the perfect toy for kids. It's so easy to make a little plastic ball and then shove a figure inside of it. It always seemed really appealing in the games. I will free you just to put you back inside a ball. There we go. Just jump straight out of something I would see in a Walmart vending machine. There we go. He is fitted. He is strapped. You don't leave home without that thing. Now, another part of the appeal is you just shove him inside. You don't have to click him into anything. And then that is that. Whoa, it's just like the video game. Hey, check this out. Look at this. Look at this man. You see that? Do you see what that is?
Holy.
You ever seen a monkey do all that?
I'm not gonna lie, dude. This monkey ball is... It's pretty super.
Don't say that. I did not order Oreo casters. Jax has all the regular characters, but sometimes they like to go a little crazy and give us something niche, like the antagonist from one of the most hated Sonic games. Let's be clear, I think 06 is unironically cool, and I think Mephiles deserves to return in the new game. Dan Green killed the performance, and Mephi is such a menacing addition to the Rogues Gallery. He hasn't been used in anything besides Sonic Forces Mobile in 18 years. It's insane to see him being sold on store shelves. Or at least, I would have liked to see him on a store shelf. You see, I was looking from store to store, town to town, asking employees if they knew who this man was. I had foot soldiers in the States on the lookout for him, and there was nada. Nothing. So now you're asking, why is he building all of this up just to say he got it on eBay? Well, I didn't. I refuse to pay shipping prices. Do you really think I'm gonna pay eBay prices and shipping prices? There's a Twitter user named FrackDeals, who's essentially the Wario64 of Sonic. They post all kinds of merch-related sales and news, but they also love giving back to the community. They posted a picture of 5 Mephiles figures they managed to come across, knowing how coveted they are. Instead of scalping it like most of the world, Frack held a giveaway. Trying my luck one last time, I entered with the best Mephiles picture I had on me. To this day, this is the only raffle or giveaway I've won by pure luck, and it just so happened to be one of my favorite Sonic villains. All of the odds were against me, between this being an infamous character, the country difference, and scalpers being rampant, but Solaris smiled on me after years of being 06's strongest soldier. This actually came from the person that sent me the Mephiles that I won, and they included a special little message for me. So go follow them on Twitter. They do giveaways for like all kinds of hard to find merchandise from like Japan and everything. Shout out to FrackDeals and thank you for this little card. There's just something really crazy about seeing Mephiles on a package with the Sonic Colors render, like the modern Sonic brand. Mephiles is the darker half of the fiery deity Solaris and an enemy to humanity's future. It's insane that I'm reading the word Solaris on a modern Sonic merch product. But I love the idea that like someone who's brand new to the series can pick this up because his design is cool, read the back and be like, oh, I want to play the game now. And interestingly, he's one of the only characters that has a base coming with him. For such a hated game, it's amazing the level of detail they actually put into him. Like, those of you that got the Jazzwares figures as a kid, you know how magical each new character was. Now imagine growing up in this generation, not really knowing who Mephiles is, but having an interest in Sonic, and you just see like all these little details on him, like the veins and the bones in his hands, and the extra little spikes coming off the end of his quills, the little airbrushed gradients on the tips of all of his quills, the creepy cracks and stitches on his eyeballs, dude, the way that it looks bloodshot. Like, this would be magical for a kid who's getting into the series to grab this guy. 4-inch Sonic figures typically have an item that comes with them, so you may be thinking like, oh, why'd they give him Mist then? I'd like to think it's because he has feet. He's not supposed to have feet on his design, it's supposed to be stubs. Like this way, he looks much more like his game version. Some fine craftsmanship. The collection. Hey, Nux. This was another dream figure of mine. I was on a down period with Sonic for multiple years because they weren't making much after Forces. But eventually Sonic 2 came out, I saw it with my friends, and it really appealed to me. It just so happened to be a movie about Knuckles, my favorite character. The movie was great, it completely restored my obsession, and a few months later I got gifted a movie Sonic figure, which motivated me to start my collection as a whole. One problem. I never actually picked up a movie Knuckles. Yeah, Sonic 3 is coming out, but they're not making any 4-inch figures for it. 4-inch figures are what all of the mainline figures are. So, for consistency's sake, I figured I should snipe this one secondhand before the collectors realize they're not getting any more 4-inch Knuckles after this. I specifically chose this one because it came with the Warp Ring, which was an aspect of the movie that had me very hyped, since it reminds me of how they used Warp Rings as like pocket portals in the Archie comics. It was a very similar concept. I gotta be honest, dude, movie Knuckles is my favorite design, aside from like classic Knuckles and modern Knuckles. I actually think that Sonic 2 has like the best box design out of all of the Jakks-specific ones. I just love that the box shape has Sonic's quills. I've always been quite impressed with the level of detail on the movie figures. Like, Movie Sonic is one of my proudest figures that I own. It's just like the sheer amount of detail you can see with all the grooves and the texture for all the fur. My friend made a very good point that when you adapt like furry CG animated characters into merchandise, they usually look very weird when they come out. But this translation was really professional, and I just love the concept of Knuckles with a chonky body. They did it in Sonic Boom, but I think it's way better in the movie form. I also love that his movie dreads like curve in on his face like an actual haircut. And of course, another thing he has of the 2-inch figures is the articulation in his arm. I'm sure the 5-inch figure will have this whenever it comes out for Sonic 3, but I don't know. I just like having consistency between my whole collection. I also like the way that they interpreted the knuckles on his fists, because it's a lot smaller and more scale with the rest of his body, unlike the Game Knuckles model, actually. Like, look how ginormous Game Knuckles' fists and spikes are compared to movie Knuckles. It's a lot more well-rounded in that regard, which I love. And I think it's really cool, too, the way that you can, like, position him in front of the Warp Ring for your display to make it look like he's just coming out of there to beat some ass, like in the Sonic 2 trailers. And he's even got detail on the bottom of the boots, too. Very unnecessary, but I'm into it. And, like, if we want to talk about Speed Battle again, this is right out of Speed Battle. Movie Knuckles and Mephiles side by side. He's even got the Warp Ring, which is an ability that Movie Knuckles has in Force's Speed Battle. There's usually a lot of third-party controllers for Xbox and Switch that have to do with like Kirby and Sonic and other kinds of brands. I usually think they're pretty mid, but this one I knew I had to get because again, I love figures and they've imprisoned a little figure inside of these controllers. It's also themed after Generations, which I think is awesome. Because, you know, Shadow Generations is coming out, so yeah, even though they're reusing 10-year-old assets like they usually do, it actually feels somewhat fitting this time around. And for $50, this tiny, tiny man could be yours. These are very expensive. I don't recommend them at the price, but I saw it on a good deal. I got it for $20. I knew it was going to be worth it. It's always really cool connecting new controllers to Steam because it automatically knows exactly what it is, gives you the button prompts, and in this very specific case, it even says Sonic the Hedgehog on the controller name. I don't know how they pulled that off of the motherboard, but that's cool. If you don't live in the US, you can't have fun. And what is a more fitting thing to go with that statement than a Sonic Symphony poster? This isn't anywhere besides basically America, so it's a cool little souvenir. Thanks to my friend. Aw, okay, check this out. Easter Sonic.
Oh my god, he's so cute, dude.
Easter Tails. This looks like a Superstars DLC you would get or something. I think it's cool when they have brand new outfits to match the season, but that's not the reason I was so hyped for this. Someone at Jakks Pacific was like, nah, we're not gonna get the okay from Sega, we're gonna find a workaround. And they packaged a Hyper Knuckles figure as a part of the Easter set. Do not be fooled, these pink shoes are actually accurate to his depiction in Archie. I found that really funny. So for all intents and purposes, this is as accurate as you're going to get for a Hyper Knuckles figure. I was really excited to put him next to my classic Super Sonic, because when I was a kid, I read an issue of Archie where they had classic Super Sonic fighting classic Hyper Knuckles, and I thought it was one of the coolest things ever. The fight choreography had me bouncing off the walls. Ever since that moment, I knew Hyper Knuckles should be canon. So this just shell-shocked me that it was even a thing. I thought I would have to custom paint it myself one day.
Too close.
Especially because they do technically have a Super Knuckles figure where he's just kind of like sparkly and nothing else is different. I guess it's supposed to be somewhat of a reference to the Super Shield in Sonic Heroes where it's like a pseudo-super form. I don't know. It's not as good.
I also have him. I have Dr. Eggman Robotnik.
Completely separate from this package, I actually managed to get my hands on some Sonic 3 figures. The ones that I'm the most interested in are the 5-inch figures, which I found one of. Thankfully it was Sonic. I'll take any one of the Hedgehogs, I just need Shadow now. Now, as I mentioned earlier, they're not making 4-inch figures for this. They're opting for 5-inch figures, which they didn't do for the other movies. This is similar to the Prime figures, where it's obviously bigger size, but they have pretty good articulation on this. The Sonic 3 figures are in high demand right now. Scalpers are grabbing as many of them as they could, which is why I'm actually quite surprised I saw Sonic on the shelf at all. I needed to leave with something Shadow related, so I also grabbed a 2-inch one. Like I already said with Knuckles, Jax locks in when they need to do detailed texturing on their figures. Like, the quality of these does not feel like $15–20, especially when you count in all the extra articulation for the 5-inch figures. This feels pretty premium for $20. In fact, one of the first things I tried doing with the Sonic figure was make him hit the pose from my trend that I accidentally started. This has all the detail of the Sonic 2 version of Sonic, but with some extra details. Like, one of my friends pointed out that he has this attempt at, like, follow me eyes, the way they do it with this kind of like glass looking plastic attempt on the eyes. They're not actually moving, but when you move to different perspectives, you see them kind of match where you're looking, which is pretty expressive. It really does feel like all of the details and grooves that they had on the 4-inch figure are present here, with some extra stuff, like on the back of his quills, they have darker blue quills. Now, this does take after the Prime figure quite a bit, because that's what they're just doing with the 5-inch ones. This is much easier to articulate, and you can actually move the fingers, which is massively appreciated. I'm sure this will satisfy a lot of people who weren't actually interested in the 4-inch line. Hell, he's even got like the little split in the middle of his torso like the Jazzwares figures did, so that he can actually move the upper half and the lower half of his body. Now to Free Shadow. And I'm very surprised with the amount of detail they managed to fit on a 2-inch figure. Like the 4-inch figure, fine, you know, it's big. 5-inch figure, like, yeah, okay, of course you're gonna have some detail on that, but this one is tiny, and yet it's still convincingly looks like his actual fur proportions, and doesn't look sloppy, and doesn't look like they're trying too hard to make it look like a more realistic version of him. He's about the same size as a lot of the other 2-inch figures, like Dread, for example. Pretty consistent with all of them. But I don't know, somehow the detail and the consistency with his movie design shines on this 2-inch figure, which is impressive to me because it's so tiny. He's actually so small that I can get 5-inch Sonic to hold him. That being said, I'm gonna have to plop down this 5-inch boy right beside all the other 5-inch Prime figures down here on my spin-off shelf.
Yo! It's a little squishy. Little squishy guy. It's the sitting ones.
That's a sticker. Almost every piece of Kirby merch has this sticker, and I like to collect them.
I gotta bust this open. Oh, it's a Waddle Dee. I was really hoping for King Dedede. Yeah, that'll go good on like my computer setup or something.
I'm about to excite some of you and unreasonably enrage some of you. Yep, it's a Sonic comic. The reason I got this cover in specific is because I've actually been a really big fan of Sonic Force's Speed Battle. Tangle, Whisper, and Surge are all playable in this. It is the very first game where they are playable in any official manner. So I think it's particularly cool that Hardlight teamed up with IDW to get an official cover made. It has one of the tracks from the games, and it has one of her official renders. Obviously, the 2D artwork has a lot more room for expression, but I wanted this one because it feels like they're taking the comic original stuff a lot more seriously, and it feels like Surge has truly ascended into mainline Sonic. This one is also particularly special because it was an online exclusive. And when I tried sending this to where I live, the grand total would have been over $100 for this $4 comic. I don't know why it's such an issue to ship to Canada. It felt like a big event celebrating her addition to the game, going alongside the comic series. It was just especially cool to have two of my hyperfixations with the comic and the mobile game jam-packed into one thing. Now, I actually have, in my possession, a copy of the very first Sonic comic I ever got when I was a kid. I don't know what happened, but as time passed, I lost this. I don't know where it went, which is crazy because it means so much to me. It just Thanos snapped. I don't know. I distinctly remember seeing this in a Walmart with my dad, and I went over there and I'm like, this is the coolest thing ever. I need this. My dad took a quick flip through it and he's like, are you sure you want this? This doesn't even have Sonic in it. But unfortunately for me, the obsession was too strong early on in my life. I had played Sonic Rush around this time, so I was very familiar with Blaze, but I thought she was 10 times cooler after seeing the way they drew her flames and tornadoes and the movements and all of them in this book. Like the way that Cream and Cheese are cowering behind all of the heat. It was just communicated so well. It was the way they drew all of her flames in like loop-de-loops and the way that it like circled around her. And I didn't have access to any of the GameCube era games when I was younger, so this did a really good job at explaining to me who Amy Rose is as a character, aside from just, you know, being girly. Like, she could actually hold her own against Blaze. It was really cool. I even remember Sonic Colors was coming out around this time, so they have several advertisements for it in the book. It's a pretty cool little time capsule. It was always really inspiring seeing the fan art section at the end of every issue. I always looked forward to this section and to see what got in and what people were making. It's actually really wild seeing this specific fan art section again after all these years. And because these issues were released very close to each other, it's also advertising the second ever issue I owned, which to this day I actually think is one of the best issues I've read in the whole comic from a story and choreography standpoint. Which is why I can't even begin to describe how lucky I was that I also managed to pick this one up too. I actually had 2 copies of this specific comic because I got one for Christmas as well, I think, and I somehow lost both of them. I am very grateful that I got to hop on this comic before the reboot happened, because I really appreciated the dynamics with the original characters and how ruthless all the villains got to be. Like, Sonic Colors was coming out around the time this came out, and I think that the colorist and artist did an amazing job depicting Sonic's proportions and quills and colors to be more like the mainline game. Like, look at that jump ball. It looks right out of Sonic Colors with all the little individual spines and spikes in it. It was this panel in which I decided I was extremely proud to be obsessed with Sonic the Hedgehog. Look at the motion in that, dude. I saw a full animation in my head when I was reading these panels for the first time. And I immediately was able to catch on to the relationship between Sonic and Bunny. I had not read anything before this. I didn't even watch Sad AM, but I knew exactly what was happening, why she was mad, and what they're usually like. This issue made me feel so validated as a kid for thinking this little cartoon character was actually a badass, because it has the exact kind of action scenes and dodging and close moments that I would imagine in my head. Even these random one-off characters have their own jump ball. Usually you see green areas and Green Hill Zone and Seaside Hill and Emerald Hill, but no, this is a desert. This is barren territory. This is unwelcoming lands. And you actually get to see him going through this rocky natural loop-de-loop from this very specific perspective that you don't usually see, that's kind of in the middle. You can see him going up and down, and you see him mid-curl in the ball, and he's still cocky while doing so. Whoa, it's Sonic! I don't think I even bought this. I think I mentioned this to my friend and she just like bought it for me? Oh my god, how did I even forget about this? I don't have to do much explaining here. I see Stretchy Sonic in the current year, I buy. I've admired first four figure Sonic stuff for nearly a decade, but I've never been able to drop $300 on one. Surprisingly, this was only around $100, I think. The box is gorgeous too. It's got all kinds of texture and graphic design all over it. I thought it was also really sick that this had the logo itself, which had this rough, rocky texture with individual grooves in it that you can feel, and the inside of the text itself has the skybox. Very Y2K. This is a very dark shade of blue that you couldn't really see inside of the packaging. He's got his big ass hands that are like the size of his head pretty much. Of course you got the stretch on the shoes, and you can see it at all of the most awkward angles that you would ever want. He's got all this curve in his quills too, look at that, look how big the middle one is. What a guy. Very smooth, nice matte texture. I think the thing that I'm the most happy with this, besides just how well they capture his expression from the artwork, the shade is not like how they do modern Sonic Blue at all. This right here is my prized possession, my trophy if you will. You will never pry him from my cold dead hands. I didn't point this out, but like his actual shoe buckle is shiny. Look at that little smirk. Look at him as a little centerpiece. Just him and the essentials, baby. This is gonna be the best night of my life. Whoa, it's Robert Pattinson Batman. He's actually here. Anyway, I like Sonic videos. Do you like Sonic videos?